Part of the journey that I took in writing this book, I actually wrote this book. I wrote a draft of it and I sent it to my editor. And she was like, this book reads like you figured out what you were thinking as you were writing it. So now that you figured that out, can you please rewrite it?
Oh, interesting.
So then I took it apart and I had to rewrite it. And so part of my journey in this book is really thinking about what is the difference between blame and accountability, right? And I think blame is like, you've done something bad, you're bad, I'm entitled to treat you like you're bad, I'm entitled to feel outrage and resentment at you. Does accountability have to be that? And that was a big kind of intellectual growth and personal growth for me over writing the book, is kind of trying to pull those ideas apart in my brain.
Because on one hand, we think that blame is warranted when a decision was an option, was present.
Yeah.
And you picked one or the other.
Yeah.
And you picked wrong, so you deserve blame.
Yeah.
But we are very forgiving if you had no choice, you weren't aware of a choice. We don't seem to blame there. But then back to the biblical framing, if you sin, regardless of you knew it was a sin or not, it's a sin.
You're still blameworthy.
Yeah, so it's like we already have kind of two radically
There's a lot of
opposed.
different ideas that we can realize are contradictory in our collective sort of cultural unconscious that are pulling on our intuitions in different ways.
I think what we should maybe attempt to define sin as we'll be using it.
Yeah. So I think we can define sin in two different ways. I think it's been defined in two different ways in church history, and then also it corresponds to these kind of two different notions of blame that we've been talking about. So one is sin is doing something that you ought not to have done. So there is some rule in your society that's a moral rule, that's a legal rule, that's a social rule that says thou ought not kill someone, thou ought not have sex with someone that's not your spouse, and you do it anyway. And usually breaking rules comes with some sort of censure or punishment.
And it has to be an active choice or no?
It just has to be an act.
Okay,
Either way.
You say your favorite definition of it is from Francis Spofford?
Yes.
Definition. Uppercase sin is the human propensity to fuck things up. It's our active inclination to break stuff. Stuff here includes moods, promises, relationships we care about, and our own well-being and other people's.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lovely thing for us to think about.
And I think it gets to, one, it's not just like there's some, authority that's telling you what not to do. When you violate a norm, you're hurting people. Often you're hurting people you care about or people who care about you. And so that tendency to fuck up your relationships because you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing because the rule is there to protect the relationship or to protect the community. I think that's a really good way to think about sin. I think what's interesting about that definition is he says it's the tendency to do that. And I think this is where we can kind of have two definitions of sin. Is sin the action, the doing it, or is sin the tendency to do it, which could be governed by all sorts of things? And I think in the Augustine tradition of you inherit sin, you're not inheriting doing something, you're inheriting a tendency to do something. Right. When you're thinking about, are you to blame for what you've done, and then the choice comes in, but sometimes we blame people for even wanting to do something, for being prone to do something.
We've even had criminal cases where someone was thinking about cannibalism and that became a court case. Where do we draw this? Where do we delineate between thinking of something and Okay, so that's all of your kind of personal journey, but then your professional journey is, which predates this book, which is heavily involved in the book, is that you publish a paper that talks about a certain aggregate of genes that you have discovered that overlap with really increased outcomes of addiction, aggressive behavior, eating disorders, sexual promiscuity, a whole bevy of different behaviors that seem to be linked by some grouping of genes.
Yes. So my lab is in what the field is known as behavioral and psychiatric genetics. So what we're interested in doing is discovering certain parts of the genome, certain parts of your DNA sequence that differ between people that increase your likelihood of developing a certain mental disorder, mental illness, and or behaving in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And this is a method, kind of a general enterprise that is shared across lots of labs, across lots of countries, most of whom have nothing to do with anything like that we would consider moral behavior. And the way these studies work is you're basically getting DNA from huge numbers of people.
Millions
of people.
Mm-hmm. God bless the Scandinavians, right? Let's give them a shout out. They have kind of public...
Iceland, UK Biobank, which is in the UK, and then 23andMe customers. So it's a lot of people that are white British 60-year-olds who've spit into a tube and given the British government so much information about their lives.
And also in Scandinavia, though, their medical records are public, although obscure. The identity is obscure, but it's all public. So you can do these enormous epidemiological studies.
And they link across medical records, criminal legal system involvement records.
They don't do that in China?
Well, if they do, they're not
sharing. They're not sharing, but they're probably doing it.
But like how they infamously debunked these vaccine autism connection claims was they were able to look at a group of 3 million kids who had been vaccinated and then a million that had not, and they could immediately show there's no difference.
There's no difference there.
So that's where it's like this huge benefit.
You have these huge data sets, and you're basically going through and you're saying, where do people differ in their DNA? And are those differences correlated with whatever behavior that I'm interested in? So what we were really interested in my group was what's known as conduct disorder, which is this diagnosis that's given to children if they are persistently breaking rules, aggressing against other people, maybe aggressing against animals. And there just wasn't the data on that in enough people. Mm-hmm. So our strategy was basically to say, what other behaviors do we think are caused by the same genes, because of family studies, because of adoption studies, for which we do have enough data on huge numbers of people. Let's pull as much data as we can on all these different behaviors and kind of triangulate across them to be like, what genes are associated with all of them. Mm-hmm. So we were looking at ADHD symptoms in childhood. We were looking at sexual behavior, age at first sexual intercourse, and number of sexual partners. The UK Biobank, if you say that you've had more than 99 sexual partners, it gives you a follow-up question, which is, are you sure?
Wow, that's very really cultural.
Are you sure? Are you sure that you've had more than 99 sexual partners? Have you ever smoked pot? Have you ever smoked a cigarette? Are you engaged in problematic alcohol use? So you drink to the point that it's a problem in your life. And do you describe yourself as a risk taker? And none of these are serious antisocial behavior. Like having sex at a slightly younger age or like being a little bit more hyperactive. Yeah. None of that is, most people wouldn't even consider that necessarily sinful behavior.
Right.
But what all those things have in common is someone in our society, maybe not your group, but someone in our society thinks that's bad behavior. Mm-hmm. And you did it anyways. Like you had sex even though, in 1960s England, it maybe wasn't that acceptable. These are like
misdemeanor sins.
Misdemeanor. That's a great word. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is that if you identify genes that are associated with these misdemeanors, that are consistently associated with all of them, you end up with a set of genes that also literally predict felonies.
Oh, wow.
Literally predict your likelihood of ever being arrested, of ever pulling a knife or gun on someone, of engaging in much more serious antisocial behavior. It also predicts if you've ever attempted suicide. So it also predicts kind of this harmful disinhibition against the self.
Yeah, and in this paper you established that this group, the people who share this cluster of genes, are twice as likely to be arrested.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty significant finding.
Exactly.
And I'll add too, it's not the case of like 1 in 1 million versus 2 in 1 million. This is like 20% versus 40%. Yeah.
Yes,
So
exactly. Many Americans have a lot of interactions with the criminal legal system. But so it's not destiny, right? It's not 100%. It's not all genetic. Like, this probably goes without saying, but no geneticist believes really in genetic determinism. Like, this is not a set of genes that fate you to be arrested, but it is a very significant increase in risk, and it's a significant increase in your risk of developing an addictive disorder too.